round you guys were pro is because they had enough sources to prove their case. Pro, you guys didn't have enough sources.
They had
to prove
2
your case.
sources. We had 20.
That's exactly what I'm saying, right? So here's a very good learning lesson, right? Even though you might be on the side of truth and you might be correct objectively, if the judge doesn't see it that way, then you technically have not won, right? Because the judge is not some robot. They're like they're a parent or a coach or whatever, right? They're also looking at the conversation. They might be caring more about cross-ex. They might be caring more about this and that, right? So clearly, obviously, even though you guys, we obviously have tons of sources in the pro case, right? We've been over it. Every single thing is
called them out on not having any sources.
Yeah, so that round, this is actually a good lesson for debate in general, right? This round, Jesse and Nathaniel's opponents were basically, they weren't really debating. They were just going at them personally with like ad homs and just going after like leading questions and stuff like that, right? How do you deal with that, right? So let's quickly talk about that. Number one, the big thing is be respectful, right? So the first thing I said was you have to take the high road here. Because if you take the high road, it's very likely that the judge is going to see that and they're going to sympathize with you a little more, right? So, in fact, one of the things that they wrote here was, I love the way you present your case. This is to the pro. Your case was very clear. Try not to be aggressive. So this is to them. So clearly the judge picked up that, the other team was being really aggressive and was asking questions. They weren't really giving you the opportunity to speak during cross. So this was a judge that, and I'm sure obviously you're debating, but if I was spectating your guys' round, I could see the judge's body language. They definitely would have been like, arms crossed, maybe they're looking down, maybe they aren't really taking notes, maybe they're just like looking, like clearly it's not like informative body language, like they're not trying to get information out of your cross, they're just trying to like watch it, right? And maybe they have a displeasing look or something like that, right? So clearly this judge didn't like that aggression. So one thing you could have done is just be a lot more confident in that, like basically give, so here's what I like to think, right? Cross-ex is like a give and a take, and you have to choose when you give and choose when you take, right? You could give things that aren't really going to hurt you, right? Like, so if you're on the pro case, right? The GPC pro case, it was about like stability and stuff like that, right? Where you should be giving is stuff about like Ukraine and stuff about like current incursions right now, right? Give like, yes, small incursions might be happening, but bigger incursions are prevented from greater, great power competition, and that prevents the stability of like, it prevents escalation, miscalc, all that stuff we talked about, right? It's a give and a take. One, it makes you seem a lot more credible because you're acknowledging that they are right about some things, but you are right about more. Because ultimately, that's what debate is, right? The big thing about debate is that both sides are supposed to have something to say at the table because you have to go pro and con, right? Realistically, if one side was correct, the debate wouldn't right? It wouldn't make any sense. So clearly, both sides have to be able to say something. So recognizing that they're right about little things that don't matter in the broader picture of things is one way to do this during cross, right? The other thing that this judge said was remember to be confident. So one big thing is like fake it till you make it, right? And it might not be great advice, but if you seriously don't know something or if you feel like you're behind on something, I would strongly recommend you just confidently present your own information and try to always work around the question, right? If they, like, do you remember in your round 3 that, in your round 2, I don't remember, it might have been their round 3, that opponent, that team, the one I'm talking about from Pinot, but they were talking about that Joe Biden peace treaty with China. Yeah. If you did not know that existed, right? Well, your first immediate thought should be, okay, well, what if this is right? Well, that's pretty bad for my case, right? How do I work around this? Say, despite this treaty possibly being true, it's just words because actions speak louder than words. We've seen escalation over the Chinese air balloon, and we've also seen, like just 2 days ago, the U.S. reconfirmed its commitments to Taiwan and sent more U.S. military troops there. So clearly, actions speak louder than words. Just because they've shaken hands at some summit 3 years ago does not provide evidence that they're going to be peaceful, right? So always work around. Use your own knowledge to work around that question, because if you fall because what was your response? You remember you were just like, oh, I did not know that. If you say that, you're conceding the point, right? You don't get to say anything there, and perceptually you've lost. That's not great, right? Especially when this judge, if you were in front of this judge, they only care about perceptions, right? They're not taking detailed notes. Does that make sense? So, yeah. Other than that, obviously, it is what it is, right? The debating itself was probably fine, but, right, so we'll just move on there. So, this is now FIFA's team. So, as you can see, your judge wrote a lot. They were very clearly taking notes, right? They were really looking at the round. You had a great judge, right? Probably
the first round. Yeah.
You had a good judge, right? Yeah. They were really nice and accommodating. They were taking notes. They were taking everything. So here's the reason for decision. Despite a lack of clear weighing of arguments, I find that the risk of nuclear war is the biggest impact. Pro does not do enough to attack, so it flows clearly to the con, which is our team, and they won, right? So clearly, right, this judge wanted a little more than just perceptions. Who was more confident? Who was just saying questions, right? They were looking at like weighing and the impacts and how the actual debating was going, right? Now, you wouldn't know that going into it, but you can kind of pick up on that, right? Because this judge was very clearly writing a lot of stuff down, right? They were keeping time, so they were engaged in the debate. Like all these little things you have to pick up on. And then if you know that, you have to change your strategy of how you're going to debate. Does that make sense? Right? So yeah, I mean, you guys, when this round I was watching, we already did the feedback on that. So good. Here is your round 2 now. This is still FIFA's round, FIFA's team. So this was a loss, and you guys were con again. So here, take a look here, right? This is a little less informative. They're really just saying good arguments, good evidence, stuff like that. They aren't really like paying too attention about the quality of debating. A lot of this feedback is about the judge saying you could have said this, you could have done this. I really don't like judges that kind of think that way, because if they're interjecting their own opinions and what you could have done, like they're trying to become the debaters, then they're gonna have some bias that's leaning some way, right? So that's obviously not a great situation to have. But here's the reason for decision. They said the pro won within the argument of the U.S. being drawn into the war with China over Taiwan, and their counter argument of the U.S. has not been attacked during any of the economic recessions that weakened the country. Okay, so the first part I don't get, because our con case is talking about the China war. Maybe they got confused. But yeah, our con case is talking about the U.S. being drawn into war, right? Because it's saying that if we keep pursuing the great power competition, it's going to lead to escalation in some conflict. So maybe they got confused about that, but whatever. Secondly, they said the U.S. has not been attacked during any of the economic recessions, right? Well, number one, right, obviously, I mean, you know, the quality of debating itself, this judge obviously had some very, you know, thing that they like isolated on, and that's why they thought like the quality of debating on the pro was better. This is a judge that's kind of in the middle of what we were talking about in the first round and what we just reviewed here, where they really just care about the perceptions and sort of only are like listening in just to get like some piece of evidence or some argument, right? Not a great judge to have. But ultimately, you know, it is what it is. They took some decent notes. Yeah. So let's move on. Okay, so this is Jesse and Nathaniel's second round. So the opponent won here. Do you guys, you know what happened that round? Do you remember? How were you feeling about that round?
We didn't turn enough.
Turn enough, okay.
Yeah, like, there were a bunch of arguments that we could turn.
They were really good on catching the latest news.
The opponent was good on the latest news.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that, right? Generally, I would recommend being very, very up to date with what's going on in the news, right? Because if you don't, because number one, it's going to make you a generally more knowledgeable person. So if they're talking about something that you've never heard of, maybe you read some news article that can, like, you know, give you some more context, give you some more insight into why they might be right or wrong on certain issues. So I would I would highly recommend reading the news every day. You can go to theweek.com. It gives you like the top 10 stories in like a minute or two to read, or you can just go on like Apple News. They cover like pretty much general stuff if you just have your phone out. So this just said, I voted pro. I didn't feel the con showed enough evidence of this imminent threat. Okay, so this is feedback that I'm sure a lot of the judges thought when we were reading the con case, right? So the debt crisis explanation, right? So I went over this at the tournament with you guys, but I think y'all misunderstood what the crisis was. It's not that if we hit the ceiling, it happens. It's that
it's interest.
Yeah, it's defaulting on the debt, and the hitting the ceiling is just a signifier that, you know, things aren't going that well.
Yeah.
Right. So we clarified that, obviously, right? What we can do in the future to fix that issue is try to do more like active recall activities with the cases. And now that so this tournament was only like 5 or 4 weeks away, right, from when like I started working with y'all. That's not enough time to teach you guys how to cut cards and write cases and everything. So this tournament I helped y'all write cases, but the next one, it's far enough away where we're gonna learn how y'all can cut cards yourselves, and you know. So obviously you writing the case is gonna be a little more knowledgeable, right? So there wasn't a problem.
Same topic?
No, it's different, right? It's different. So we have to move on.
Do you know what the topic is?
We are voting on it right now. So we have 2 suggestions. One is about right to work laws, which are like about unions.
That's high school.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's also that we have to vote on the middle school topic.
Okay.
So that's one of the options. The other one is about some Artemis Accords, some military treaty with India, stuff like that.
Is it the same school that we're doing the tournament?
No, we'll go to a different school probably. It'll change the location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the first one sounds
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit. Honestly, labor laws are a little. I mean, it's good to learn about labor laws, like you all will likely work.
So
and
are we
stuff
gonna
like that.
do congressional or?
Well, that's the thing. So we'll go over congressional. I guess I'll change the plan. We'll go over congressional next week, and then I guess give you guys like a week or two to decide what you all want to do, and then we'll just figure it out.
I mean, if we do congressional, we almost all have to do congressional.
How? Why does that work?
Isn't it 2 and 5?
Is it? No. Oh no, that's world school. That's world schools.
Oh.
Congressional is the one where you're going independently and you're just practicing. We'll talk about that later, right? Anyway, so yeah, here feedback I would give. This was just an issue with the case. The other thing was perceptions is also a big thing here. As you can see, the judge is really writing about a bunch of quotes that's going on, and like some suggestions, like yeah, like here a big thing. Con, you don't have to accept questions, and especially loaded questions. That's a big thing, right? If they're asking you a loaded question, does everyone know what a loaded question is? Anyone want to give me a quick explanation of what
A
that is?
question that they already know the answer to, and like.
Yeah,
probably
they're
want
trying
have
to
a special
basically
response.
they're trying to get you to say an answer, right? So like if I'm like an eyewitness at like a traffic accident, okay? And then the cop comes up to me and he asks like, "Okay, did you see the broken stop sign? Or did you see a broken stop sign?" The implies that there was a broken stop sign and I should have seen it. A implies that I don't, like they're actually asking me if there was or not, right? So the phrasing and the framing of certain questions can sort of, implicitly imply another answer. Really watch out, right? If they like, for example, if you were the con, you were asking them a loaded question, it might just be like, why do you expect that we can continue to pursue the great power competition with rising debt levels and that we're about to default on our debts? That assumes a lot of stuff, right? Number one, GPC has additional costs.
We actually asked that question on the
Yeah,
third round.
like it's not a bad idea to ask leading questions, but just like it's probably good, but just make sure you don't get caught in that trap. Does that make sense? Everyone good? Okay. So that was this judge. Scrolling through. Okay, we have another round here. So this is the one that your team won. As you can see, your judge is doing some pretty good notes, right?
Yeah, he said he was a former teacher of ours.
Yeah, there you go, right? So generally going to be doing some good notes. Talking about delivery a lot, quoting a lot right here. So here are some comments for the pro, I guess. Ultimately, their reason for decision was pretty long, but I remember reading this, and it was basically just about impacts and stuff like that. So when your judge tells you that they're a former instructor and a teacher, you should generally know that they're going to be a little more old school, that they're going to like more impact stuff and just direct weighing and stuff like that. Yeah, they're probably going to care about like your speech quality and stuff like that, but ultimately they're going to give more credence to like, like the quality of debating itself, right? Okay. Last one before we move on to our intro to LD thing. Also, you guys should get out your okay, cool. Yeah, open them up to the Google Drive. You want? Can you come here and type your email in, and I can share the Google Drive with you?
Is it the grape?
Yeah, the MIMS one, and go to the slide decks or something. Yeah, give me 1 second. Okay, so just type your email in here, and then it'll share the whole Google Drive. So this is where we put all of our presentations and all of our cases and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, Mommy, do you know that TA Rogers didn't have power for like half